Welcome back to part 2 of our scandalous cheating in F1 series. If you missed the first episode, you missed out on Crashgate, Spygate, all the gates, so make sure you go check that out if you've not already. In this episode, we're looking at technical cheating, the genius ways that engineers and designers have found ways to cleverly sneak under the radar of the FIA checks in order to get maximum performance from the cars. And some of these are so genius,
I'm not even mad. That's amazing.
Let's take a look. In 1993, the inclusion of driver aids and complex electronics had hit fever pitch, and the FIA sought to ban them for the 1994 season. The teams were stripped of tools such as active suspension, traction and launch control, along with anti-lock brakes, and in-race refueling was also reintroduced to the F1 equation. Ayrton Senna, having moved to Williams, was convinced that Benetton had sidestepped the regulatory changes. His suspicions were aroused by the quick pit stops that Benetton had been making during the Brazil season opener, along with the sound that the B194 was making out on track, that he was listening to having stayed trackside after crashing out on the first lap of the Pacific Grand Prix at Ada. Following Senna's death at Imola, the FIA asked 3 teams, Benetton, McLaren and Ferrari, to supply their engine management system codes. Benetton received a fine for handing them over late, as engine supplier Cosworth did not want to hand the FIA its programming, citing commercial reasons. But later that year, the FIA had completed its analysis of Benetton's software and found a smoking gun, which became known as Option 13. This was Benetton's launch control system, which could be armed to allow the driver to manage a start with a single action. Benetton argued that it was only used for testing purposes and required a lengthy startup process to get it to work, but the FIA found that it could be activated via a laptop plugged into the car. The driver would then have to enable it with a certain sequence of steering wheel inputs, almost like a video game cheat code. But the FIA could find no evidence that it had been used in a race, so they were in the clear, right? Well, no, because what the FIA did find was Benetton had been running its fuel pump without a filter, which allowed fuel into the car at a faster rate to save about a second in a pit stop. This was discovered after an investigation following Jos Verstappen's terrifying refueling fire at the 1994 German Grand Prix. Slam dunk for the FIA, right? No, because the company in charge of the fueling rigs, Intertechnique, had allegedly told teams to remove the filter, meaning Benetton was in the clear. Well, actually, again, no.
Oh, come on!
Because the team did cop the wrath of the stewards that year, as Michael Schumacher was disqualified for serving a stop-go penalty for overtaking Damon Hill on the formation lap, too late, and then banned him for 2 races after his skid block had worn past the allowed level. Cheeky, cheeky Benetton. When the turbocharged era first hit Formula 1, the significant power advantage that the forced induction powertrains brought, once reliability was dialed in, rose in popularity. But the naturally aspirated cars, owing to their lighter engines, had a weight advantage. To combat this, F1 had mandated a minimum weight requirement, so the non-turbo cars could build their cars under weight, but then would have to take it up to the limit with a ballast. The rules also specified that the cars should be weighed, topped up with their usual fluids, coolants and the like. And so the likes of Brabham, Williams and McLaren, the leading naturally aspirated runners, hatched upon a cunning plan: water-cooled brakes. The car's water tanks were topped up for the start of the race to make the weight requirements, only to be sprayed out in the general direction of the brakes to run under weight through the race. Those tanks could then be topped up later ahead of the post-race inspection, meaning the cars would again weigh in at the right amount. Genius, right? After Brabham's Nelson Piquet and Williams' Keke Rosberg finished first and second in the 1982 Brazilian Grand Prix, the cars were protested and disqualified from the results after the FIA sought to put an end to the practice. John Watson, driving for McLaren, managed to assume second as his car was not protested against by the turbocharged teams. But with the lines drawn between turbo and non-turbo cars, the latter group elected to not attend the San Marino Grand Prix 2 rounds later. Tyrrell had been a force to be reckoned with in the early 1970s, but as F1 budgets skyrocketed, the British team couldn't keep up with its competitors. With turbo engines becoming more commonplace in F1, Tyrrell opted to continue with the cheaper, naturally aspirated Cosworth V8. But the turbo units could churn out around 1,000 brake horsepower in qualifying trim, which meant that Tyrrell was barely on the same playing field as the rest of its main rivals. With a little sprinkling of ingenuity, the Occam-based team sought to redress the balance. The team's 012 car was designed to run underweight, but after Pfizer closed the loophole where cars could top up with water after the race, thanks to the water-cooled brakes incident, Tyrrell had to find another cunning way to get its cars up to weight during the race. Here's how they did it. Tyrrell used their final pit stops to fill the car with a mix of water and lead shot to weigh down the car, which would give them plenty of running in the race underweight. Teams reported that plenty of spilled lead shot would frequently litter the Tyrrell pit box, and the team eventually got caught loading the cars with this extra weight. But that's not all. It was also found that the team also peppered the water mix with a range of aromatics, which the team used to spray the inlets to derive extra power from the engine. As the team was considered to have been taking on extra fuel during pit stops, in addition to running underweight, Tyrrell's full 1984 results were deleted and the team disqualified from the entire season. Drivers Martin Brundle and Stefan Beloff were also banned from competing in the final 3 races of the year. Just goes to show, cheating gets you nowhere. Which of these did you think was the most genius? Personally, I quite like the water-cooled brakes idea, but what did you think? Let us know in the comments below and be sure to subscribe and join us for our final part on F1's biggest cheats. See you next time.